By 1781, the Revolutionary War had dragged on for 6 grueling years, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The British, under the impression that the southern colonies were more sympathetic to the Crown, their campaign in the southern states initially saw some success, with significant victories in Georgia and South Carolina. However, despite these early gains, the British struggled to maintain control in the face of persistent guerrilla warfare and the tenacious resistance of the Continental General Cornwallis, entrusted with the task of securing the southern colonies, had led a vigorous campaign through the Carolinas, defeating American forces in several battles. Yet, his success came at a cost. The Americans, under General Nathanael Greene, employed a strategy of attrition, avoiding large-scale confrontations and instead wearing down the British through a series of smaller, more strategic engagements. This war of attrition stretched British resources thin and isolated Cornwallis from the support he desperately needed. By the summer of 1781, Cornwallis decided to move his forces into Virginia, hoping to secure reinforcements and supplies. He chose Yorktown, a small tobacco port on the York River, as his base of operations, believing it to be a secure location where he could await assistance from the British Navy. The Franco-American alliance was a critical factor in the success of the Yorktown campaign, and without it, the American forces would have likely struggled to achieve victory. France, motivated by a desire to weaken its long-time rival Britain and regain prestige after the losses of the 7 Years' War, had entered the conflict on the side of the Americans in 1778. French financial aid, military supplies, and, crucially, naval support bolstered the American war effort, providing resources that the fledgling nation could not produce on its own. By 1781, the French commitment to the American cause was substantial. General Rochambeau had arrived in America with a sizable force in 1780, and while they had initially been stationed in Rhode Island, they were ready to join Washington in a major offensive. The French fleet, under the command of Admiral Francois-Joseph Paul de Grasse, played an indispensable role in challenging British naval supremacy along the American coast. De Grasse's fleet, the largest and most powerful naval force the French had deployed to North America, was crucial in determining the outcome of the Yorktown campaign. In the summer of 1781, Washington learned of de Grasse's plans to sail to the Chesapeake Bay with his fleet. Recognizing the strategic opportunity this presented, Washington, in coordination with Rochambeau, devised a bold plan to move their combined forces from New York to Virginia. This maneuver, involving the rapid movement of nearly 12,000 troops across hundreds of miles, required secrecy and precise timing. Washington employed various tactics to deceive the British, making them believe that an attack on New York City was imminent. This ruse successfully diverted British attention away from Virginia, allowing the Franco-American forces to march southward without facing significant opposition. The march of Washington's army from New York to Virginia was a remarkable logistical feat, showcasing the determination and discipline of the Continental Army and its French allies. In late August 1781, Washington led approximately 7,000 Continental soldiers and 4,000 French troops on a 400-mile trek that would culminate in one of the most significant sieges in military history. By late September, the Franco-American forces had converged on Yorktown, linking up with the Marquis de Lafayette's troops, who had been shadowing Cornwallis's movements in Virginia. The combined army, now numbering around 17,000 soldiers, vastly outnumbered Cornwallis's 8,000 British and Hessian troops. With the French fleet controlling the waters and Washington's forces surrounding Yorktown on land, Cornwallis found himself in an increasingly desperate situation. On September 28, 1781, the siege officially began as the Franco-American army moved into position and began constructing siege lines around the British defenses. The American and French forces worked tirelessly, digging parallel trenches closer and closer to the enemy lines, gradually tightening the noose around Cornwallis. The construction of these siege lines was a meticulous and dangerous task, often conducted under enemy fire, but it was essential for bringing the American artillery within range of the British positions. The bombardment began on October 9th, with American and French cannons unleashing a relentless barrage on the British fortifications. Day and night, the British forces were subjected to a withering artillery fire that gradually reduced their defenses to rubble. The constant bombardment took a severe toll on the morale of Cornwallis's troops, who found themselves trapped, isolated, and under continuous attack with no hope of relief. As the siege progressed, the Franco-American forces continued to inch closer to the British lines, their siege works bringing them ever nearer to the final assault. With the loss of redoubts 9 and 10, the British defenses at Yorktown were fatally compromised. The Franco-American forces tightened their siege lines even further, bringing their artillery closer to the British positions and increasing the intensity of the bombardment. Cornwallis, realizing that his situation was hopeless and that any further resistance would only result in unnecessary bloodshed, began to consider surrender. In a symbolic and somewhat humiliating gesture, Cornwallis claimed to be ill and did not attend the surrender ceremony. Instead, he sent his second-in-command, General Charles O'Hara, to present his sword to the victors. O'Hara first attempted to surrender to Rochambeau, who directed him to Washington. In a moment of magnanimity, and perhaps to avoid further embarrassment to his British counterpart, Washington accepted the surrender of Cornwallis's sword through his own second-in-command, General Benjamin Lincoln. This act symbolized the end of British dominance in the American colonies and the birth of a new nation. The Siege of Yorktown remains a symbol of American perseverance, determination, and the realization of the revolutionary ideals that had inspired the fight for independence. It is remembered as a pivotal chapter in the history of the United States, a testament to the resilience and courage of those who fought to secure liberty and self-determination for future generations.